Welcome to a new video in my home automation series, and I guess it's not going to be a shocker, but it's Dashboard 2.0 time again. Since I started working on the new file manager in Dashboard 2.0, I need new dialogues. So I thought, let's just work on these dialogues, work on the various things that I need for that, and we can cover it so we can just move on and then go back to the file browser again. So I need a couple of dialogues, sort of like confirmation dialogues, and also need dialogues where you can enter data into. So this is what I've been playing around with, and also what the community was playing around with, because I got really stuck in the beginning. So I started asking questions, and actually there is a very good forum on, well, a topic on this forum. So I got most of my information from here, and there was some really good examples that I think Colin did that I was able to reuse and change and make it to what I need. So a couple of things. So I have a dialog like this, and you can OK it. And also I have another dialog which can do data entry. Yep. So you can, change the value, and then you can do that, because I definitely want to have that as well. And then I also started playing around with something where you can have maybe two dates, and if you want to do from and to, then you do that. And probably I also need like a file upload one, which I will do in the next couple of days. But yeah, that's what we are going to talk about. And I would say it's fairly simple. There are some quirks in this, but other than that, it's really easy to do. So let's just look at the examples. So I don't have an awful lot of examples, but I think if you understand how they work, it should be very easy to make the changes to them. And by the way, I was mostly following these page on the the dialog beautify components. There are some other stuff here where things where, for example, well, it says persistent, but I think I usually call these modal dialogues where you can't click elsewhere. In all my examples, you can click elsewhere, and they just treat it as like the cancel event. And there are some interesting stuff here, how you can get things flying from the top of the button. I mean, they are nice, but I don't think they are essential. And you can also nest dialogues. So yeah, that's cool as well. And you can also have these, bigger dialogues. That's cool. I don't think I would need them. And there were also examples, I think, where you would have something which, oh yeah, you see these things. So that's what I try to replicate. And I also had things where I mean, that's cool as well. So maybe this is something that I can use. So it's sort of like it full screen and flies from the bottom up. And that's easy to hide a lot of things that you normally don't need on the screen, but you just need to bring up occasionally, and then it's okay for it to disappear. So there are some really cool stuff here. Maybe I will come back to that in the future. So the first example is going to be a very simple dialogue. And it's a bit ugly. Sorry. So yeah, I trigger that dialogue, and it just comes up in a screen. It's a huge dialogue. And yeah, as you can see, oops, you can click on the close button, and then you can also click anywhere else, and then it just disappears. So yeah, and then as you can see, it sends out, it basically just sends out a message that the dialogue was acknowledged. And if you look at the code, it just gives you a basic, things how this code works. So you create a template, you create a dialogue. Most of the cases that I have seen within the dialogue, within the dialogue there is a card created. So it's the same as the weather card and some of the other cards we used. So it usually has a toolbar, and that toolbar just basically renders the the title. So that's the the blue color. So we use the primary color, which is, I mean, in my case, is blue. And it has a title, so it has a card title, and within the card text we put the basically the content. And we picked an H2, so heading 2 text. This is why it is so big, but you can change this to, I don't know, H5 or H6 if you want lower fonts. so it doesn't become so big. And within the card actions, we create one single button, which does the close dialog. And here in this example, there is an object which is called the dialog data, and then it has, as you can see, a title and a content. And then when we send a payload, then we check, well, we put the payload into the dialog data, and then we say that the dialog data dot shown is false. And also, as far as I can remember, this is required in order to clear the information from the just to make sure that we are not sending the input data right to the output. And we also need some methods. So what happens when you close or click on the dialog, either beside on the close button or outside the dialog, it just closes. And I mean, it says dot shown, so it the true means that the dialog is not shown, and false means that the dialog was shown. And also in the example, there are a couple of computed methods, and this is something actually, I mean, this was taken from an example. So, and this is something that I should start doing a little bit more. So we create these conditions with a question mark, and also, the double question mark, to make sure that we handle all the cases in case we receive a payload which is not properly formatted. And finally we clear the variable. So this dialog just pops up the dialog, and it doesn't really care about what is the output, because as you can see, there is nothing really sent on the output. So this example is good enough, and if you see in the inject node, we have a title and a content. So you can send in the title and the content that you want to be displayed, but then you don't really care about the output. So you have a process, you throw up a dialog which says, okay, something completed, and then the user can just dismiss it and nothing else happens. So this is the most simplest dialog that you can do. But in most cases, we want something a little bit more complicated, because we want at least like, 2 options, or we want the user to also, we want to wait for the user response. And this is where the second example comes in. So if I do this, then we can see that it is fairly similar. So we have a title, we have a text, and then we have 2 buttons. And if I click OK, then I get the word back OK. And if I click cancel, or I click anywhere next to the window, then we get a message cancel. So this definitely, tells us what the user has done. And actually, I think this is pretty much Colin's example from this topic. And as you can see, it has it also expects the data to have a title and a content, and it also you can also send in 2 OK text and a cancel text buttons. So you can just have them, yes or no, or you can localize it, or you can use any other button texts that you want. But then the structure is very similar. So we have a dialog and a card and a toolbar, and the card text, you can see it's H6 here, so it's a smaller font. And then in the cards, we just have 2 buttons. And again, if you want to change the appearance, so if you don't want it to, come with these colors, you want the more muted ones, you can change the variant not to be elevated, and it's not going to be like, the blue colors. Well, for me, the primary color is blue. So here you can see on the buttons that the OK text and the cancel text is actually linked to the v-HTML, and here also in the card text it is linked to the v-HTML. And if you watch my last video, which I did on well, actually that was a Fly browser, so I also learned that if you do this v-HTML tag, then it's going to insert this value between you know, the attributes, that's going to be the inner text, but you can use HTML code as well. So here in the content, you can format the content to have line breaks and that sort of stuff, which I actually already used in my code. And also you can do the same in the button. So for example, if you want to have a button which has 2 lines of the text, then in this cancel text and the OK text, you can send something like, you know, a word BR, you know, in these characters, and then it's going to be broken up into 2 lines. Or maybe if we want to add an icon or something like that. Okay, so these are the buttons, and as you can see, there is a cancel dialog and the OK dialog action, sorry, event linked to these buttons when they are clicked. And by the way, it is also mentioned here that it says all the properties contain embedded, may contain embedded HTML. Actually, I should change this here because in the original example there was no title. I added the title, and as you can see, for the title I didn't use the v-HTML title. I just used the double curly brackets to insert the title, so the title cannot have any HTML content. But I think it's probably the I mean, you know, title, in most cases you just want a simple text, so I don't think that it's such a big problem. I will come to this a little bit later, but in the main text you have the same thing. So you look at the payload, and then, you know, you can assign the OK text and a cancel text to the appropriate attributes, and we still have all the computed ones which get the title, the content, the OK text and the cancel text. And as you can see in the expression, if you don't provide either the OK or the cancel text, then it just gets defaulted to OK and a cancel. And we have methods to when you click the OK button or the cancel button, or you clicked outside. And then you can have you know, separate actions if you want, but as you can see, all we are doing is if you clicked on OK, we put the OK text into the payload and we send it out. So this is why we get OK. So obviously if you do yes and no, then you would get either yes or no. And if you do cancel, then we send a cancel text. And if you clicked outside, we again send a cancel text. So as I said, clicking outside is like canceling the dialog. But there is one important thing here, which is described here. So it was pretty much the same with Dashboard 1.0, which was a single user environment, and Dashboard 2.0 in the standard as we use it is still a single user environment. But what can be done here by this specific code here is that we can check that, you know, what is this this socket ID is something which is generated by Dashboard 2.0 based on the sort of like this session that you look at the your dashboard in. And then what that basically does is that you can control that this this dialog only appears on your screen and not on somebody else's screen. And that's a little bit difficult to show you, but let me just create this example. So let's say I have 2 windows. I'm going to put them side by side. And if I go back to my Node-RED, and if I click on this, if I click on this inject button, what we are going to notice that we get the pop-up on both screens. So, and I have to cancel on both of them. And actually we will get, you know, 2 responses. So I click cancel on one of my session and OK on my other session. And that's because when you have an inject button, that inject button doesn't have any information of the session where it was pressed, because it's happening in sort of in the background. So it doesn't have any of that data. But what you can see here is I created a button on the UI, and this button is going to initiate the OK and the cancel dialog. So what happens now is that if I click on that's the button. If I click on this button, so when you click on sort of like if you have a message which originates from a UI element, in this case the button, it has all the information about your session and everything. So that can be compared with the, with the session when the dialog is about to be opened. So it checks whether those IDs are the same, and this is how it knows to only raise this message on the same session where you clicked on the button which created this dialog. So you can see now that I have OK button, and the dialog did not open on the other screen, but now it does. So that's the main difference between this code, this dialog and the previous one, and that's basically just down to the fact that here in the message function, we first of all check that the payload should be an object, because we get all the titles and the content. It checks the socket ID which comes from the message, which then was generated when you clicked on the button, matches the socket ID of the instance where this template node or this function is being triggered. So obviously if you have two dashboard 2.0 screens, then they would have a different socket ID, and that can be matched with the the socket ID which is stored in the original message. So if you want to use this functionality, you have to be sure that your your process originates from a message where all this information, so the message underscore client, is maintained. So you can easily do that by creating. So if I use this, sorry, let me just check one second. Yeah. So let me just put a debug node here, and actually I'm going to say this debug to complete message. So if I do this, deploy, and so if I initiate this button, then we can see that this is how the message looks like, and it has a client. So it has a socket ID because it comes, the message comes from the UI. But if I just do an inject, it doesn't have a client. So that's where the difference is. So if you want to have these sort of like unique buttons, I mean, if it really matters for you, if you're building a dashboard which only uses, I mean, it's mostly you who are using it, it doesn't really make a difference. But then you have to make sure that your message originates from, let's say, a button or something on the screen which has the client ID, and then make sure that your flow is always using that message. And let's say you modify the topic, you modify the payload, but you don't create a new message object which would not inherit the underscore client. So just make sure that you copy the underscore client object over, because otherwise you won't get this information. You won't be able to pass this information into your dialog, and it's just going to appear on all your sessions, which is, again, it's not necessarily wrong, but maybe you don't want to do that. Okay, and finally going back to this OK dialog, and that's how you send in a payload. So you see the title and the content, and you send the OK text and a cancel text. And as I said, we looked at the code that if you don't provide these two, then it just gets defaulted to OK and cancel. Okay, good. Moving over, the next one is the one which has an entry. So this has a text. Oh, I should have changed the title. And anyway, yeah, I didn't style it too much, to be honest. I was just copying and pasting it and making small changes. So what I did here is I added an input form, and obviously you have to build everything into a template node, so you can't reuse these input. I mean, normally this would be the text input, not the text input here, but you can't, put the text input into a template, so you have to do it yourself manually. And by the way, we haven't really viewed this, but in the Viewtify components within input and form controls, it has everything which is supported. So you see the text field here. So this is what I was using. I was using a simple text field like this, but you can do like, icons, and you can do like clearable, and these are all the things that you can have in the text input. You can have some other buttons, and then, icons, inner, outer icons. There is, again, so much that you can do here, and we could spend a whole day, looking for these examples. But for the time being, I just wanted something simple. So in my example, let's say I want to where is my example? So in my example, I wanted to do something simple like maybe you want to change the set temperature, but you don't want it on the UI, you want to have it on a pop-up so it doesn't take up space once you set it. So you can change the temperature, you can click on OK, and then you get a new temperature which says the action is OK because you press the OK button and the value is 30. Or if you click cancel, then you just get action cancelled. And by the way, I am specifically using the I'm changing only the payload and not the topic, because I want the topic to come through from the original topic, what the incoming message was, because this is how I can tell, you know, after the template node what sort of happened before. And this is something that I used in a file browser example quite a lot. So going into the example, I added two more attributes to the incoming message, text label and text value, which is, well, you can pre-populate a value and then you can put a text label which says, you know, what the information that should be entered. So let's just look at it again. So this is the text label and that's the text value. And by the way, there are so many like hints and other stuff in the text input that you can also customize. So it's pretty good. Top of it is, I mean, you know, the initial part of it is template, dialog, card, toolbar, card text. So that's the same. And I decided to put these v text fields. So that's the text field that I just mentioned here as the component, and I put it inside the card text because otherwise it just goes all the way to the screen. So this is how I could easily just put a border next to it. And I also added this line, so there is a little bit of space between the text here and the field. But that's basically the space here. That's the this div. And on the text field, again, I've just gone for the bare minimum. It has a label and it has a value. And the label, I want it to come from the field text label, so it has a colon, and the value is always the v model. So that's the variable text value. So again, label and the value. And the buttons are the same, nothing really changed. And the message function is almost the same, so we assign the two buttons. And what I am doing here is I'm assigning a text value from the text value variable. Again, I'm using these question marks so we don't get too much errors if you fail to provide a text value in the incoming message, so it just defaults to empty. But it initially assigns the text value, so when the pop-up comes, it already has a number which you send in via the input message. And I have done this because originally I have created a computed methods, but that just, I mean, you're not supposed to do that because that triggers every time, even if you change the value manually. So we only have a computed function, sorry, not method, function. So we only have a computed function for the text label, but the text value, it gets assigned here in the original message, well, in the message function. And I've also modified the OK and the cancel. Oh, I should have done this as well, just to make this consistent. So I modified the OK, the cancel, and the on-click outside actions. So I wanted to do this so you can always look at the message.payload.action to tell whether it was whether the OK or the cancel was clicked. And if the OK was clicked, then you get the new value in the text value. So we could see that I changed it to 30 and I clicked OK, I got 30. Otherwise, I just get cancel. And that's it. It's yeah, it's as simple as that. Okay, so I need to make that change. And oops, going back. Okay. And then finally, I wanted something which has more than one input fields. I mean, it's really complicated once you figured out how that works. And it's that. So yeah, it still has the same title in the context, but I have two input fields now, and I've converted these input fields to date types. And so I specify that the type is a date type, so it automatically creates this input where I can select the date and the time. And if I submit, then I get again an action which says the OK button was pressed, and I get a from value and a to from date value and the to date value. And I'm not really sure how sort of localization works in the view components. I mean, this is normally how I use dates locally. I mean, in Hungary we do year, month, day. And I don't know whether it's, but you know, my Windows is set to the UK localization. So actually it would be day, month, year. So I don't know whether this is sort of like browser dependent, or it is sort of like just hard-coded in the view that the dates are always returned in this format, which is definitely would be interesting to know, because because the code would need to adapt. I mean, it would be great if the date would always be represented this way, because then I can build the code to sort of like know that that's the date format, but I'm not really sure. So that's definitely interesting. Probably I'm going to ask in the forum, but I'm not sure. So definitely my Windows is set to UK locale, and I think in the settings as well. I don't know how to check. Whatever. So it's definitely set to UK. I mean, if you see this, that's the UK date format, 2nd of March 2024. Anyway, going back to the dialog. So that's the output format, and then let me just trigger it again so we can see. Yeah. So in the input format, you can send in like, okay, that's my title, that's my context, which is the main text, the name of the two buttons, and I can send in the label for the first date and the value for the first date, label for the second date and the value for the second date. So label, value, label, value. And as you can see, I'm sending in the date in the year, month, day format as well here with a dash, and then it sort of understands that it's the 22nd of March and the 22nd of April. So 22nd of March, 22nd of April. So even though I'm sending in this format in the UI, it displays in the locale format that I expected, which is same as the sort of like the Windows locale. Okay, anyway, by the way, I didn't show you the ones for the text field, but I guess it makes sense now. And it was also on the help in the comments section. So I updated the comment section here as well, just to show you an example. And the change is fairly straightforward. So again, in the card text, we have the content and we have a spacer, and then we have the first text field and a spacer and the second text field. And really the only difference here is that the name of the label and the value is different, but then the type is date. And interestingly, I didn't find the documentation for this here. So it says v text field, and if I scroll down to see all the attributes, there is definitely a type here. There is T, letter T, one more, title type. Sets the input type. Yep. And then the default is text. But I mean, I know that email exists, time exists. I was assuming that date exists as well, which it does. And I think there is one which is called a password, so it just shows stars as you type. But I'm not really sure what other types exist, and it would be nice if there is like a link, something, but maybe it's self-explanatory. I just don't know anything about that. The buttons are the same, and the function has been modified a little. So now when we receive a message, then we assign, basically initialize the from date value and the to date value from the payload from date value to date value. And again, if they don't exist, then they just get empty. And then when the OK is pressed, then we send a message which says the action is the OK text and from date value and the to date value. So as you can see, you can easily change. I mean, if you want to have a specific dialog which has, you know, maybe one of the field is a number, you want to give it a different names because they are not dates, then you can just easily change that. You should make sure that you replace all these examples, all the instances of the field name. So you change them like you know, here and then here as well, and then, you know, up here as well. But I like the fact that if you highlight, then it's going to show you all the, you know, the places where it is used, so it's easy to change them. And I should do the same here, what I've just done previously. And in the computed section, again, I initialize the from date label and the to date label based on this logic here. So there is not an awful lot of change from in this dialog from the, you know, the previous one up here or up here. So I think about this, I'm hopefully able to show you that it is very easy to create this custom dialog with a, you know, different set of input forms. And I mean, all my examples so far, I only used text fields, but as you can see, there are so many other cases here. And if you go back to the dialog itself in the documentation, and if you look at this edit profile example, you can see how you can, you know, customize these pop-ups. So let's say it has an icon here, and then the fields are not on below each other, but sort of like in a table layout. And as you can see, this is how the hints look like. So you can click on the field and the hint appears here. And yeah, you can do, like, you know, drop downs and everything. So there is a lot of stuff here in the input fields and controls that you can all use. Okay, and going back to here, is there anything that I wanted to say? No, that's pretty much it. And yeah, it looks good, and I think it should be fairly easy to do. And maybe if you really want a modal dialog, then again you can look at the example here. I think there was a modal dialog example that's persistent, so you can check what it does in order not to oh, it just says persistent in the dialog. So you can do that, and you won't be able to click outside the box. You definitely have to click one of the buttons. But for me, it is good enough that I click outside and it just treat it as a cancel action. I think that's going to be, you know, sufficient for most of my processes. Okay, that would be all, I think, for today. As usual, I'm going to publish this example, and you will find that in the video description. But I think that should be all for today. Thanks for watching, and hopefully see you in the next video.